Hello, this is Kevin bringing the Providence Journal for this August 21st, 2024. First article by Johnny Williams. Charlestown's breachway is filling with sand, threatening businesses and Nanegret Pond. Charleston. At the Charlestown breachway, a large portion of the rock wall that protects the upper channel from the incoming tide is gone. Now, water daily pours through the gaping hole, pulling sand into the channel. I've been studying the breachway for 25 years, said Stephen McCandless, Charlestown's GIS coordinator, on a recent site visit. It's never been this clogged up. Like many coastal towns, Charlestown traces much of its current erosion troubles to Superstorm Sandy in 2012. That storm's toll on its beaches and dunes is still felt to this day, but it was this past winter's storms that just finished it off, McCandless explained. Between March 2023 and May 2024, the beach on the western side of the breachway lost 135 feet of real estate, according to aerial survey data. McCandless estimates the breachway was usually at least 5 to 6 feet deep, but the buildup of sediment has raised the channel's floor so it is only 2 to 3 feet deep now at low tide. In some parts, it is as shallow as a foot deep. Damage is impacting local businesses. The previously non-existent sandbar in the breachway is creating higher than usual waves, meaning recreational boaters run the risk of getting beached, battered, or hitting the breachway's rocks. Tim O'Donnell, who runs Breachway Bait and Tackle with his son, Declan O'Donnell, said that on a regular day, boats come in and out of Nanegret Pond, but on a recent gusty afternoon, few dared making the treacherous crossing. The slower traffic is affecting business. O'Donnell estimates that Breachway Bait and Tackle has seen a dip of about 20% in sales. John Lyons, president of Ocean House Marina, one of the 3 marinas in Nanegret Pond, also worries about the reduced traffic. His marina services over 500 boats a year. He estimated that gas sales at Ocean House Marina are 2/3 down, indicating the decline in boaters coming in. If the breachway is not repaired, he added, it could impact scores of jobs in marinas, shellfish farms, bait and tackle shops, and other businesses on the pond. Threat to aquaculture. The clogging of the breachway also poses a threat to aquaculture. In 2022, shell fishermen harvested nearly 11 million oysters for consumption in Rhode Island, according to a report from the Coastal Resources Management Council. Rob Krause, owner of the 7-acre Nanegret Oysters and vice chair of Coastal Pond Commission of Charleston, estimates that close to 40% of those oysters come from Nanegret Pond. He said the blockage is a massive concern to shellfish farmers like himself. For our industry, it totally closes off. The water quality issue could get us to the point where we're no longer able to harvest and work our farms, Krause said. Matt Behan, owner of Behan Family Farm, a 12.5-acre oyster farm in Nanegret Pond, said that the clogging is probably the worst thing that has happened to the breachway since it was built. For farmers like him and Krause, the tidal exchange that happens at the breachway is their lifeline. The more flow that we have, it brings that colder, more oxygenated water full of nutrients and pushes it all around the pond so that it flushes out the pond, so it's nice, clean water in here, Behan explained. Krause worries that if the tidal exchange is not restored, he could see a mass mortality of the aquaculture crops and wild fish which attract recreational fishermen. What can be done? For Charleston and Breachway poses a peculiar problem. The Rhode Island Division of Harbors and Rivers oversaw the construction of the current structure in 1952. Ultimately, the breachway is state property, said Charlestown Town Manager Jeffrey Allen. So, ultimately, it is certainly a responsibility of the state of Rhode Island to fix it. Allen said the town is coordinating with the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management and the CRMC to find a short-term and long-term solution to the situation. The challenge, however, as many coastal towns have learned in these types of environmental projects, is finding the funding. McCandless said the town has applied for federal funds to fix the breachway, and Senator Sheldon Whitehouse has submitted an earmark request in the next federal fiscal budget for dredging and restoration. Senator Whitehouse's office did not provide the amount requested, But at a recent site visit, Representative Seth Magaziner said it was in the neighborhood of $5 million. The budget may not be approved until the end of September, and that is barring any partisan stonewalling that could happen during an election year. And even after it's approved, Charleston may have to contribute some matching funds to the project. McCandless has been proactive in laying much of the groundwork for the project, including securing a grant for the design work for the repair. But there is only so much the town can do on its own, and the clock is ticking, with the permitting process in a short dredging window to consider. Some have thought of taking matters into their own hands. Krause suggested rallying a sandbag brigade to plug the hole on the breachway's western wall, an idea that McCandless and others said would likely not last. But the issue cannot be put off for long, said Deborah Carney, Charleston's town council president. While we are waiting, our local businesses are suffering, and with the summer season almost over, we can't keep waiting, and we can't make it through hurricane season, Carney said. Next article by Wheeler Copperthwaite. Rhode Island Housing will loan these housing projects $185 million. Here's where it's going. Of the 869 units being financed, 470 will be new and 399 will be renovations. Providence. The Rhode Island Housing Board voted to issue $185 million in bonds last week to cover low-interest loans for 11 income-restricted housing projects, which will total 869 units. Rhode Island Housing will issue the $185 million over two bonds. The first will be for $88 million, with prices expected to be reported later this month, and the remainder issued by the end of this year or the beginning of 2025. After the bonds are issued, Rhode Island Housing will use the money to issue low-interest loans for 11 projects it has already approved loans for in time for the deals to close. Of the 869 units, at least 399 are being renovated, while 470 appear to be new units. Of the $185 million to be issued in the bonds, $11.8 million will be used for a debt service reserve, while $173.3 million will be issued as the low-interest loans. These projects will receive loans. Summer Street Apartments, Providence, $42 million to be loaned for the 176-unit project being constructed by Crossroads, Rhode Island on Summer Street. The apartments will be permanent supportive housing for formerly homeless people. Once construction is complete, the people living in Crossroads' current home, the Tower, at 160 Broad Street, will be moved into the new apartments. The 176 single-occupancy rooms in the Tower will be transformed into 80 apartments. Park Home Phase 4, Newport, $11.4 million to be loaned towards the fourth phase of redevelopment of a 262-unit public housing project in Newport with added units. The loan will go toward the demolition of 74 units and the creation of 51 townhomes. The demolished units are planned to be replaced in the fifth phase. The Avenue, Providence, $16 million to be loaned for 85 units. The income-restricted project is being built by the nonprofit Developer One Neighborhood Builders at the corner of Atwells Avenue and Knight Street, across from the towering Church of the Holy Ghost in Federal Hill. The new apartment building will account for 39 units, while another 46 units across 13 buildings in Elmwood will be renovated. The two projects were tied together to have a better chance of being awarded the scarce state funding dollars available. Potters Tigray, Providence, $8.7 million to be loaned for 57 units. The income-restricted project by the nonprofit developer SWAP, Stop Wasting Abandoned Property, involves the renovation of 37 units and the construction of 20 new units in 11 buildings across various vacant sites in South Providence. The 20 new units will be for people making 30 to 60% of the area median income, or AMI. Reynolds Farm Senior Housing, 2. North Kingston, $8.75 million in loans for 40 income and age-restricted units. In 2021, Phase 1, made up of 40 units, was completed. The income-restricted units are part of a larger three-phase market-rate planned community on 78 acres encompassing 600 units. The income-restricted units were required as part of the town's approval of the project. Broad Street Homes, Central Falls, $11 million to be loaned for 44 units in 2 buildings across the street from each other by nonprofit developer One Neighborhood Builders. One is a new building at the site of a former Dunkin', and the other is the conversion of a former police station and courthouse. Aid Bethune House. Portsmouth, $13.6 million in loans towards a 54-unit apartment complex of income restricted and age-restricted units at a senior center at 110 Bristol Ferry Road. Lockwood Apartments Phase 1. Providence, $12.3 million to be loaned for the renovation of 108 units. Phase 1 is for the 108 townhouses in 17 garden-style townhouse buildings at 50 Prairie Ave in South Providence, while Phase 2 will be the renovation of the 101 units in the adjacent high-rise. The apartments are restricted to households making 60% of the area median income, and 80% are supported by Section 8 housing vouchers. Wynn Companies, LLC, is the developer. Hillside Village, Providence, $11 million to be loaned for the renovation of 42 units at the 3-building apartment complex at the Silver Lake near Pocasset Manor Complex. The developer is Preservation of Affordable Housing, Inc., or POAH. Pocasset Manor, Providence, $15 million to be loaned for the renovation of 82 units in the 11-story senior housing complex in Silver Lake. The developer is Preservation of Affordable Housing, Inc., POAH. Hillcrest Village, Providence, $23.5 million to be loaned for the renovation of 130 units at the 6-story, 130-unit housing complex building in 1979 in Mount Pleasant at 40 Leander Street. Renovations will include new kitchen cabinets and countertops, updated lighting, new doors, a new roof, wireless internet access, and upgrades to the Americans with Disabilities Act units. What is the income range for the units? All of the units that will receive low-interest loans are for people and families making up to 80% of the area median income, or AMI, although many are restricted to people who make much less. Here is what income limits look like for residents based on household size. This represents the maximum yearly income a family could make to be eligible. For the 30% bracket, 1 person, $23,600. 2 people, $27,000. 3 people, $30,350. 4 people, $33,700. In the 60% bracket, 1 person, $47,220. 2 people, $54,000. 3 people, $60,720. 4 people, $67,440. In the 80% bracket, 1 person, $62,950. 2 people, $71,950. 3 people, $90,950. 4 people, $89,900. Next article by Catherine Gregg. Sign stealing, mail ballot tampering, accusations fly in House District 9 race. Providence. Former state rep Anastasia Williams, who is facing an ethics investigation for alleged lapses in reporting her sources of income, has asked state and local police to investigate what she says is the theft of her campaign signs and potential mail ballot improprieties. It is not entirely clear who Williams is accusing of what in this run-up to the September 10th Democratic primary, and she declined further comment on Tuesday, saying the matter is now in the hands of police. What accusations is Anastasia Williams making? The former Providence lawmaker, who was embroiled in a 3-way Democratic primary contest for the House District 9 seat she lost 2 years ago to Representative Enrique Sanchez, alleges her opponents, in the plural, have been up to their illegal acts in an attempt to defeat her. The race pits Williams, who currently calls herself Anastasia instead of Anastasia, against Sanchez, the incumbent, and Santos Javier. On Monday, the day before the State Ethics Commission was scheduled to take up a complaint filed against her by the Sanchez campaign, Williams announced she was filing complaints with the Providence Police, the Rhode Island State Police, and the State Board of Elections. She did not make the actual complaints public, but she issued a statement in which she alleged that approximately half of her campaign signs had been removed or stolen from their approved locations, that individuals have been identifying themselves as campaign workers in an attempt to illegally collect mail ballots. She said she had been informed that these individuals have called certain voters and then gone to their houses to collect the mail ballots just to have the voter sign the ballot, hand it over to them without filling it out completely. These people are traumatized by finding themselves in the middle of a police investigation and vowing to never vote again, Williams said. What do her opponents say? Javier has not yet responded to journal inquiries about what, if anything, he knows about Williams's allegations, but Sanchez's campaign manager Michael Garman said, "The Sanchez campaign has not engaged in any of the alleged activities. We have not touched and would never touch any signs except for our own. And the only mail ballots we have collected have been filled out, signed, and sealed by the voters themselves, and given to us to turn in by the voters." He said, "We have not tampered with and would not ever tamper with any ballot or ballot application." What is happening with the complaints? Asked what happens next, Board of Elections spokesman Christopher Hunter said, "There is no formal complaint filed with the Board of Elections." Anastasia Williams did not notify the board about her concerns and shared that she has already contacted the state police. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Creamer of the Rhode Island State Police told the Journal at 9:53 a.m. on Tuesday, "We received the complaint yesterday, and as we began looking into the matter, we learned that Ms. Williams had previously filed the same complaint with the Providence Police Department. I understand that the Providence Police Department is investigating, and I will defer any questions to them," he continued. But that's not what Lindsay Legg, the spokeswoman for the Providence Police, told the Journal when contacted. "I'm not sure when you connected with RISP, but it looks like they are handling this matter going forward," she wrote at 1:46 p.m. Ethics Commission investigation into Williams. While the city and state police bounced the political hot potato back and forth, the Ethics Commission on Tuesday voted to look into the allegations contained in a complaint that Sanchez's campaign manager, Garman, filed against Williams on July 29th. In that complaint, Garman alleged that Williams failed in her required financial disclosure filings with the Ethics Commission to disclose that she had been working since September 2023 in a new job as coordinator for community organizations at the Providence Recreation Department, as well as any rental income over several years from property she identified as rental property she owned at 17 to 19 Division Street. Williams, who reported in her filing the job she held with a different city department before moving to the Recreation Department, told the Journal she wasn't trying to hide anything. It was the same city, she explained. As for the rental income, she said she reported the property as rental to the ethics form and did not believe more was required. The Sanchez campaign filed a separate complaint against Javier that failed to file his own ethics disclosure statement within 30 days of declaring his candidacy or disclose past rental income. The Ethics Commission agreed to investigate that claim as well. Javier, who describes himself as a self-employed janitor, filed the required statement a little more than a week after the Sanchez campaign was filed on July 29th. More mail ballot tampering. On Monday, the Sanchez campaign raised a new issue, the alleged tampering with phone numbers on mail ballot applications. Pointing the finger at Javier, Sanchez said a voter had signed a sworn affidavit stating that the phone number that he listed on his mail ballot application was altered without his consent after he handed it over to the campaign team of my opponent. The alteration, according to the voter, was made in a different color ink, the Sanchez campaign alleged in a press release. As of close of business on Tuesday, there were 587 applicants for mail ballots in the House District 9. 468 ballots have been mailed out, 47 returned to the Board of Elections as completed, according to the Secretary of State's office. Another 57 applications have been rejected for yet unknown reasons. Next article by Mark Patinkin. Amid the shouting and disruption, protesters must remember to be politically strategic. Not long ago, some pro-Palestinian protesters began chanting during a Kamala Harris rally, interrupting her. From the podium, she had a pointed response. She turned their way and said, "If you want Trump to win, then say that." She meant Trump would be less sympathetic to their cause, but the protesters didn't care. It's the same this week in Chicago, with thousands of anti-Israel activists outside the city's United Center protesting the party that leans more their way than Republicans. Why would they do that? The truth is, it has often been like that with the left. They're more interested in shouting and disrupting than being politically strategic. I was there once myself, guilty of it myself, in the middle of protesters who were similarly undercutting their own goals. It happened in the same city where the current convention is unfolding. It was 1968, the week of the famous Democratic Convention in Chicago. The party was there to rally around their newish standard bearer, Vice President Hubert Humphrey. Humphrey was a longtime liberal, and certainly for the left a far better choice than conservative Republican Richard Nixon, his inevitable opponent. But we didn't care. We only knew we were angry primarily about Vietnam. President Lyndon Johnson was seen as a pariah by us for continuing the war. Because of the nationwide protests over it, he had announced he would not run for re-election. At first, we thought one of our heroes, Robert Kennedy, would emerge as the new nominee. But in a tragedy that resonates to some of us still today, he was assassinated a few months before. So now it was Vice President Humphrey. Oh, and one other even more ultra-liberal long-shot candidate, Senator Eugene McCarthy. I was only 15, but decided to volunteer for McCarthy, which is what brought me to the middle of that tumultuous protest scene outside Chicago's Conrad Hilton Hotel. That was the epicenter since security made it impossible to get near the convention hall. I can picture it still. It was around 10 p.m., the night of the decisive convention vote. Tens of thousands of scruffy kids filled the streets around the hotel, shouting at hundreds of cops dressed in riot gear. You could feel things were about to explode. Eugene McCarthy had just put out a directive to us volunteers. Stay clean for Gene. They wanted to show that his supporters weren't just a bunch of hippies. So I was in sport jacket and tie. As the night got late, the throngs of protesters knew the delegate vote was unfolding, with Humphrey building a majority. So the crowds outside the hotel began shouting our anti-Humphrey slogan, "Dump the Hump." Because I had McCarthy volunteer credentials around my neck, I was able to get in and out of the mostly sealed-off lobby at the Hilton. At one point, I went in and saw on TV screens that it had happened. Humphrey won the vote. He began to address the hall, but protesters had gotten inside and shouted him down with the same phrase, "Dump the hump." It was so loud he had to abandon the podium, sadly, shaking his head. I went back outside, and soon things did explode. The cops wading into the protesters with tear gas and billy clubs. It was brutal, kids bleeding from the head, dragged into police wagons, the crowd shouting, the whole world's watching as the news cameras filmed it all. Long-haired protesters all around me were grabbed, shoved, and hit by cops. Apparently my sport jacket gave me immunity. They were just going after the dirty hippies. That night split the party, and in November, Humphrey lost to the conservative Republican Richard Nixon, who no doubt kept Vietnam going longer than Humphrey would have. Not to mention Nixon's other conservative policies the liberal left hated. But that's who we bought by angrily besieging the convention, too self-righteous to realize we should embrace the best candidate we could get, even if it was imperfect. Having been part of it, I still understand the passion of the young crowds. But I'm more clear today how such leftist protesters then and now are often destructive to their own cause. Because their priority is slogans, shouting, and disruption, instead of strategically managing the real world of political choices. Next article by Mark Reynolds. After a random encounter in Wendy's, 80-year-old woman was left for dead in Smithfield Woods, Coventry. An 80-year-old woman encountered a random stranger at Wendy's on Saturday evening. She was friendly enough to engage in some small talk with the man. The 53-year-old man, Stephen Henning, was a dangerous criminal, and through the conversation he learned that the woman lived alone, Coventry police said Tuesday. Within hours, Henning had broken into her home and strangled her until she was so limp he could steal her car and other belongings, said Coventry Police Detective Paul Pacheco. Pacheco gave a detailed account of what happened, explaining how the work of police in Smithfield and Providence led to Henning's capture. He emphasized the extreme and uncommon randomness of a crime for a reason, saying that Coventry police don't want elderly in the community to feel that they are being targeted. "This was a very, very random attack with no links between the two," Pacheco said. "We don't want our elderly, vulnerable people to feel like they're being targeted." A chain of stolen automobiles begins in Ohio. Henning had recently stolen a vehicle in Ohio and driven it to Rhode Island. Pacheco said Henning was sensitive to the idea that a stolen vehicle could draw attention from police. Henning, he said, discarded the stolen vehicle from Ohio before he stole a car in Burrillville and used it for a couple of days. By Saturday, Henning realized that he wanted another car. That's when he made his way to the Wendy's. Hiding in bushes in Coventry. From Wendy's, Henning tracked the woman to her house in Coventry, parking a vehicle stolen in Burrillville nearby. He stealthily scouted the situation inside the residence, hiding in some nearby bushes for a while before he barged in through a back door, Pacheco said. Henning demanded money, jewelry, and the woman's car keys. He then attempted to strangle the woman. He eventually dragged her limp body out of the house and put her into the trunk of her own vehicle. It appears she was not totally unconscious, but she was unresponsive, Pacheco says. Perhaps she was in and out of consciousness, he added. From there, said Pacheco, Henning drove to a scheduled and heavily wooded location in Smithfield. There, he opened the trunk and strangled her again until he believed she was lifeless, Pacheco said. Henning dragged her into some thick brush and left her there. On Sunday morning, Coventry police learned that an elderly local woman had walked out of the woods in Smithfield and asked for help. She told her story. She was taken to the hospital, where she remained into Tuesday in stable condition, Pacheco said. Our officers responded to her residence in Coventry, Pacheco said. Police saw that the woman's vehicle, a small SUV, was missing, immediately reported it as stolen, and confirmed problems at the particular house. Meantime, Smithfield police went back to the woodsy area where the woman had surfaced earlier that morning. While they were there, the woman's SUV rolled in. Henning was in it, Pacheco said. A pursuit commenced, he said, but after it hit speeds of 100 miles per hour, police broke it off. Not long after, a vigilant Providence police officer saw the vehicle in the city's Hartford neighborhood. The officer quickly turned around to try to stop it, briefly losing sight of it down a side street. The car was parked when the officer saw it again. But a person who matched the description of the suspect in the chase was nearby. Henning saw the officer and fled into a nearby apartment where Providence police eventually arrested him. And that will be all for the Providence Journal on this August 21st, 2024.